You're listening to Coupled With, the podcast that helps you take the guesswork out of feeling seen, heard, and valued in your relationship. If you've ever felt stuck in the same arguments, struggled to stay connected, or wondered how to better communicate with your partner, you're in the right place. I'm Dr. Rachel Orlick, a couples therapist and coach, and together, we're going to make relationships make sense. Let's dive in. Today's episode is one that is going to linger, in the best way. I'm joined by Edan Zebooloon, a fellow EFT therapist with a powerful personal story and a deep understanding of male vulnerability. We talk about the quiet grief men carry, how couples get stuck when one partner wants more emotional openness but doesn't know how to receive it, and what it really takes for men to feel safe enough to drop their armor. Whether you're in a relationship with a man, raising one, or you are one, this conversation will challenge and move you. Let's get into it. So welcome to Coupled With today. We have Edan, who is an amazing couples therapist in the EFT world. And we're going to be talking all about male vulnerability, which is a really important topic in today's culture, especially when we're thinking about going to couples counseling, working with our spouses or our partners, and how we can really feel more connected to our loved ones. So welcome to the show, Edan.
Thank you, Rachel. I was really touched when you had suggested that I come on your show. And at the time, I didn't know, what I might be speaking to, but I just had this hit, something around vulnerability and men, because it's something that has been very much coming up in my own practice, but I've just been seeing it in the wider culture. Um, and I just felt like it is important that someone in our position be speaking to it that I've not been hearing sufficiently.
Yeah, I know you've done a lot of work in this area personally. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
I appreciate that. It's the main reason why I am here and became a therapist. And ironically, it stems a lot from me not feeling like I was a real man myself. Since I was a boy, I was always more vulnerable and more emotionally sensitive than the other boys around me. And even in my own family, where I would be teased, there was a period in late childhood and through adolescence where I would try to make myself be like the other boys and men, and I was not successful at it. In late adolescence, where I was close to suicide
Mm.
because it was just too painful to try to uphold it. And I just surrendered to the fight and resigned myself that I guess I just never will be a real man. And the irony is that freed me up to just be who I was. So when I was in my early 20s, I was invited to a men's group, and I would be the one who was just sharing what was really authentically going on for me and just speaking and expressing rawly with my emotion. And so by the end of that, um, I was blown away when all these big studly dudes came around me and thanked me for my vulnerability, saying that it gave them permission to be vulnerable. And I was not expecting that, but it was the start of me coming to consider, even though it's been a long journey since then, that this thing that I thought was a deficit and a liability was actually possibly an asset.
Sure. Well, it sounds like from that story that even the people who we might classify as real men also have this vulnerable side, but they don't know how to access it. And seeing you be so vulnerable in that way really gave them that permission that it was okay for them to attend to that part of themselves.
Well, it's interesting you say that they don't know how to access. And I had dinner with a good buddy of mine last night, and I asked him about this. And because he grew up more the stereotypical boy and man, and he said it's not even something that was on his radar. That it's not like when I suggested it can seem like men are deer in headlights when it comes to vulnerability. He said, no, it's not even something that I was aware of. It's just something that I've been accustomed to of not feeling. And so
Yeah.
not being vulnerable. So vulnerability is just a very foreign concept. And so that's something that I've been coming to examine more.
Do you think that's a function of how we teach men versus women to recognize emotion?
Very much so. And even though it's sad how, girls and women have been, you especially see this in the political sphere, have been shamed for being more emotional, they still have permission and expectation to be emotionally vulnerable, whereas for boys and men, that's not been the case.
Yeah. Women have this, you're either not enough or too much, but men, if you access that at all, it's just not okay.
Exactly.
It really is such this bind because when we're thinking about couples and people going into couples therapy and wanting to be closer and more connected, I know in my practice and maybe you see something similar, women say they want to see their partners open up. They want to have access to that, but when men finally do, it actually can trigger more of that cycle or more judgment or panic in that relationship. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, it's something I've encountered quite frequently myself. And it's interesting because one might think that this is a male female phenomenon, but I've seen this even in just the other day with a gay couple that I was working with. That on the one hand, wanting our significant other to be more emotionally present and expressive, but then when they are, that is not received the way that, would be rewarding. So men are damned if they do and damned if they don't. It's something that I, observed in a couple that I was working with relatively recently, where it was played out classically of the girlfriend saying that they wanted her boyfriend to be more emotionally present and expressive. But then when he finally was, she was having a visceral reaction. And as we examined it, it's interesting that as much as she was pleased that she found in him someone who is different than her abusive father and the machismo other men and boyfriends that she's had, that when she was experiencing this sensitivity, it was unsettling for her. And, just recognizing that as much as she's saying that she wants it, it's hard to trust in and to feel like her partner is able to be strong then for her to be vulnerable.
Mhm. So it's this balance of wanting strength and vulnerability, but sometimes seeing that vulnerability as weakness or experiencing it as such in the moment.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've been really grateful for the work of Brené Brown and just being more popularized in our culture. To paraphrase that, we've had it backwards, that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's actually a strength. And
Mhm.
not being vulnerable has been the true weakness. But that said, it's still not realized, in reality. And so, unfortunately, boys and men feel like it's a trap that they're being asked to walk into.
Yeah. Well, you want this, but then you're telling me I'm weak when I do it, and all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm not going there. I'm not going to expose myself only to have it dismissed or diminished or invalidated.
Yeah, and it's not even something that is conscious on the part of the men, and that's something that I've been giving thought as I have had some time to, in anticipation of our talk here, that because I hear a lot of, women complain about why are their husbands not showing up, and it's the worst of both worlds of they're not being the providers that they want to be the case exactly, or they're not helping out around the house and so forth, and I believe it has a lot to do with as wonderful as it was that there was the women's liberation movement and it was a long time coming. There hasn't been a similar men's liberation movement. And so this generation has been in this quandary of looking to their forefathers, and there's a part of them that still believes they have to be like that, so
Mhm.
shut down and unemotional. But then on the other side, about being told that there's something wrong with them for that, and being told to be more sensitive and so forth, but not knowing like how to navigate this transition and how to truly experience success in it, then they end up failing on all fronts.
It's such an unrealistic expectation to be everything. And it sounds like it's a really big burden to carry, and how disappointing it is to feel like you can never achieve or be enough.
Yeah, and that's where I'm hoping that it helps for women, or again, even in queer gay relationships to be aware of this. That if you want to have your vulnerability received and validated and empathized with, which is one of the things that I really love about our model of emotionally focused therapy, is the emphasis on that. And vulnerability, emotional vulnerability is very much at the heart of our work. But being able to validate and empathize with what our experience is, um, you're not likely to get what your partner has not had themselves. And so, as a man myself, I do consider myself a feminist, and where I've had some reticence to express this, but as much as women have been needing to be really seen, and that's not been the case, sadly, because of the way patriarchy has been so dominant. We need to find a way for men to be better seen. And so it's
Mhm.
something that I've seen parallels in my experience as a biracial person to healing racism, that none of us are free unless all of us are free. So people of color and other marginalized peoples, and in this case, women, are not going to likely be free unless we're able to help men to get free.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. And as this dynamic is going on, I can imagine there being a lot of this emotional gridlock that could happen that as therapists, we really need to be aware of and work through in the therapeutic environment to make it safe.
Exactly, and I'm glad that you said that because that's where I believe, the couples are coming to us for support. But if the therapist is not mindful of these dynamics and phenomenon, then we're not going to be able to help them to break free of this gridlock. But it feels like a betrayal to being a man. Like they're being asked to divulge in a sense, like the secrets of being a man, like is but it's not even as conscious of that. And it contributes to what we often see in men of anger, because they feel like it's a threat and they're not even aware of what that threat is exactly, but it is a threat both to their own masculinity, and themselves as an individual, but it's also a threat to the relationship that whether their partner is conscious of it or not, that their resistance to opening up is to preserve the security of the relationship.
It's interesting that you talk about anger and security of the relationship kind of in the same breath. How does that work? If anger becomes this reaction to protect the vulnerability, but anger in a relationship ends up being a danger signal because it can feel threatening when your partner is angry with you on that attachment level, then how do we get past that?
Yeah, if I'm understanding you correctly, that the female partner is experiencing the threat of the anger
Yes.
themselves. It again, it's usually women who are leading with their vulnerability, and they're wanting to be received by their partner. That even though it's often met with anger, if they could try to perceive that there's a softer, more tender, vulnerable emotion underneath that anger for their partner. And that as much as that they're experiencing the threat of the anger, that the reason for the anger is because their husband or boyfriend is feeling threatened. And if we could just have that acknowledgement to begin with, and then curiosity as to what is the threat, then it can hopefully diffuse that for both.
Sure. I could see how somebody listening to this might take that in as, well, it always comes back to female partner and they're doing something that is hurting their husbands and they have to kind of take that anger. But that's not what we're saying. We're saying
No.
something else that's bringing more understanding to it. It's not, it's okay for that person to always be angry with me and not hear how that's impacting me, but also just being more gentle and curious about how that protection is coming forward and what they might be feeling underneath it. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, and it's something that I, especially again as a man, have been self-conscious of in my work, of that then I was perpetuating the harm of women. In order for us to not be harmed, the person who's experiencing that more overtly, then we need to help to figure out what is the harm that is happening for our partner and for us to help.
Kind of acknowledging like anger isn't what we want to show up here because that there's a danger alarm bell that that sets off. But in order to let that anger down and let that protector down, then we have to be able to be okay with what's underneath that and show our partner that it's safe to come forward in that. And that might mean having some ownership in the piece that hurt them. Like if there were words that we used or actions that we took that hurt our partner, that we then saw anger, but underneath there's something much more vulnerable. And when we can own that and understand it instead of take it very personally, take it as accusation or blame that we started the cycle, but it's just understanding this cycle better. So I understand that when I come at you with anger, you pull away and have to protect yourself. But if I come towards you with something more vulnerable, my fear is that you will still back away and not be there for me when I am naked and alone.
If we are being judgmental and critical and especially shaming of it, then we're not going to be experiencing healing around that.
And that's really what I love about emotionally focused therapy because it does have this cycle where there's no one to blame. It's just understanding how we are contributing to this cycle that's ongoing with our partner.
Exactly, and it's something that for 4 years in a men's group based off of Brené Brown's work, with a female colleague, who's also an emotionally focused therapist, and she would often say to the men that men are hurt a lot more than they acknowledge.
Yeah.
And if we could uncover what that hurt is, even though it's not going to be obvious, it's what's going to be able to help repair the hurt for both of them. And it goes back to what we're touching on earlier, that even though that may be a fact that the husband or boyfriend, male partner is experiencing hurt, they have not even been conscious of it themselves fully or feel like it's okay to acknowledge it
Mm,
because it has not been acceptable to acknowledge being hurt. It would be a sign of weakness, and or it will be used against them.
I can imagine how awful that would feel in those moments of vulnerability.
I have found that part of the resistance to being vulnerable and where the person who's on the one hand asking for it is what helps us to feel closer and better connected. The vulnerability is what is able to help us to experience greater intimacy. It can also play into this dynamic that can feel like a parent and child,
Mm.
that then makes it hard to just be lovers and partners. And so that's something that if we don't acknowledge as therapists and help them to recognize that, then they can fall into this false dichotomy of it's either one or the other.
I think I understand what you mean about the parent and child, but just so everybody else who might be listening can understand that, can you say a little bit more?
Yeah, I observed this even in this gay couple I was working with the other day, that when their partner was opening up and sharing more vulnerably and was being like lured to come out of their foxhole and to be vulnerable, and they finally did, and they just, they were crying and just
Mhm.
sharing just how difficult it's for them, and then wanting their partner's help with it. Then the partner had a reaction of like, I want you to be more emotionally present and available, but don't expect me to have to do that work for you essentially. And then it's like where they feel like then they're being asked to be like the parent. A
Mm.
lot of it has to do with because they're afraid that if they do lean into that role of being a nurturing responder now to their partner's vulnerability is going to kill any of the sexual chemistry and attraction.
Yeah. A few episodes ago, I recorded an episode on co-regulation, and that's what this is bringing up, where in a true, intimate, loving relationship, we co-regulate with our partner. And when we are in a relationship with somebody, we accept and work with their areas of growth, and we work with them as challenges as part of the relationship rather than leave them alone with it or try to do it for them, either overfunction or underfunction.
Exactly, and that's part of that false dichotomy that I think is important for therapists to be aware of, but then to help the clients to recognize that, it doesn't have to be one or the other, that there is a healthier, happy medium between the 2.
Well, all right. So, as we're getting ready to wrap up here today, I have one final question. So, for the men who might be listening today who really want to start working on cracking open some of that armor. And for the women or partners who want to support that without shaming or chasing, then what's something that they could each do differently?
As easier said than done as it is, to not expect this is going to be just like a flip of a switch.
Sure.
And to the reason why I'm saying that is to allow that grace. And if we don't, it is going to make it more difficult for both of them to really open up to this. And so it can be backfiring to a great extent if there's not that acknowledgement. But that said, something else that I've come to realize that men need other men to model vulnerability.
Mhm.
And if they don't have that, it's going to be difficult for them to really open up to that themselves. Men's groups and, particularly speaking to vulnerability and just how powerful that has been of the same guys that we've been talking about here, when they're able to show up in a container that they are seeing other men opening up. It's almost like a kettle of popcorn. That's like when one pops and then another pops, and it's just so beautiful that is not able to really be experienced, like in especially like a heterosexual relationship, that it's going to be harder for the man to feel like it's okay to be
Mm,
vulnerable with their female partner if they've not had that witnessed and experienced with other men. So
mm,
that's a big one
okay.
for what the man can do. Um, and then for the woman is like I was suggesting earlier, for them to consider that if they're experiencing some type of hurt or harm, that the likelihood is really good that their husband or boyfriend is. And to just have that grace for them, and if they can validate and empathize with them in that, it will help their male partner to soften and to open up. May not be right in that moment. And that's the other thing that stereotypically, and in this respect, I relate a lot more to women, tend to be the anxious pursuers. And
Mm,
it's like the fox and the hound, that it's the hound barking and chasing after the fox. And so is it any wonder that the fox is gonna wanna retreat into their hole more? But if we could step back and practice being more patient and having compassion and grace, then there is going to be a greater chance for the fox to feel safe to come out.
yeah.
So that's a big part of it. And then recognizing that what we're experiencing now has its origin and its roots somewhere. And
Mm,
it's something that men have been acculturated with in our society. And there have been studies that have shown that boys are actually more emotionally sensitive than girls. And it's why they're suffering more in schools and so forth, but it's not recognized and
mm,
appreciated. So if both of them could go back, and this one couple that I was working with recently was sharing about a story when he was 12 years old and how he was literally and figuratively beaten for his vulnerability. That's when he shut it down. And if we could go
mm.
back and reclaim that, that's what's going to help both of them be able to open up to that more moving forward together.
Yeah. As you're describing that, one, I feel so sad because I have a young boy at home, and I just feel so sad thinking about that. And on the other hand, it just sounds like generations and generations of trauma.
Exactly.
Nobody develops these protections, these guards for no reason. They all come from a really good reason. And being more curious and sensitive around those, it sounds like what you're saying will help some of that drop away to make more safety for the the boy or the sensitivity to come forward.
Exactly. And so
Sure.
one of the things that I love giving as a homework assignment to couples early on after examining some of these things is for them to get pictures of that wounded child for each of them. Because it's not just boys who were harmed and hurt, but girls also. If we can get pictures of that vulnerable, wounded child, then it can help them to see what the one that is being reactive now and the one being reacted to is coming from this hurt place.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing that and giving us this not novel, but maybe novel for some perspective and really valuable perspective. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on today.
Yeah, and thank you for allowing for this platform that I just, again, believe it is really critical that there's more awareness around this phenomenon.
I hope people listening to this are able to take some nuggets from this and really be able to incorporate it into their own life and know that men, women, nobody's broken for having soft emotions and needing to be cared for and loved and seen. I'm so grateful to Edan for bringing such nuance, honesty, and depth to this conversation. What stood out to me most was the idea that men often want to be emotionally available, but without models, safety, or permission, it can feel impossible. If you're wanting to show up differently in your relationship or support your partner in doing so, Edan gave us some powerful tools to start with: patience, grace, and a willingness to see the hurt underneath the reaction. You can find Edan's information in the show notes if you'd like to connect with him and learn more about his work. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you'd share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Until next time. Until next time. I'm so grateful to Edan for bringing such nuance, honesty, and depth to this conversation. What stood out most to me was the idea that men often want to be emotionally available, but without models, safety, or permission, it can feel impossible. If you're wanting to show up differently in your relationship or support your partner in doing so, Edan gave us some powerful tools to start with: patience, grace, and a willingness to see the hurt underneath the reaction. You can find Edan's information in the show notes if you'd like to connect with him or learn more about his work. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you could share it with somebody who needs to hear it. If you've been nodding along during this episode thinking, this is exactly what happens in my relationship, but I don't know how to stop it, I made something for you. It's a free 7-day email course called Break the Cycle. Each day, I'll walk you through simple steps to stop the same fight from repeating and start rebuilding real connection without shutting down, walking on eggshells, or trying to do it all perfectly. You can sign up at my website. I'll link it in the show notes. It's totally free. This isn't just about communication. It's about breaking patterns that are breaking you. That's it for today's episode of Coupled With. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to hit subscribe so you never miss what's next. And if you found it helpful, please share it with a friend or leave a quick rating and review. It really helps more than you know. And if you're curious about how we might work together or want more resources to strengthen your relationship, head over to my website, www.drrachelorlick.com. You'll find free tools, podcast extras, and ways to go deeper. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.